to Frog Question Friday.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Frog Questions podcast. I figured we'd take this first episode and just kind of give some background on what Frog Questions is. I know some of you may be familiar with Frog Questions, some of you may be not so familiar with Frog Questions. And I think the best way to explain what Frog Questions is to first, I guess, introduce myself and my background and lead up to how Frog Questions started about 8 years ago. So my name is Ben Maerzke, and I generally dislike people, that is to say human beings. This would be, of course, with the exception of my wife, who I do not deserve, but who I somehow ended up with. The reason that I dislike humans in general is that I found people, in my experience and through keeping up with current events, I found people to be tribal, rude, and self-interested. And it doesn't help that I am an introvert by nature and I prefer not to be around people anyway. But I think all of these things led me in my first year of college to pursue a degree in computer science. I love computers. I love working with computers. I still do to this day like computers and programming. I love the logic of programming languages. But perhaps the bigger draw for me to computer science my first year of college was because once I became a software developer, I wouldn't have to spend that much time around other people. So that's definitely nice. But into my first year of college studying computer science, I realized that there was really something missing. Although I did enjoy programming computers and I loved doing that, I realized that there were these fundamental questions that I had about the universe that I still couldn't answer. Questions like, does God exist? Or what is our purpose on Earth? What are we really supposed to do? Is there a meaning to all of this? And I also realized if I couldn't answer those fundamental questions about the universe, there wasn't much point to programming computers at all. I mean, what was the point of anything if I can't answer these important questions about everything else? That led me in the summer of 2006 to a summer program / pilgrimage called Crossroads. And that's a story for another time, but while I was on Crossroads, I met a lot of people who I grew to respect very greatly, and one of these people told me that whatever I ended up doing, I really needed to work with other people, which was not something that my own personality had led me to believe. Is something I still question, I guess. But it did make me reconsider my choice of major, at least, and after bouncing around to a few different colleges, I ended up graduating with a degree in theology, which is the study of God and religion. And this led me pretty directly to my first job and the job I'm still in today, which is a religion teacher. So in the fall of 2010, I became a religion teacher at a Catholic high school. And what I found in the classroom, what I found in high school students, is that, again, people are tribal, rude, and self-interested. And for all this talk, all this phraseology I hear about how high school isn't the real world, but we need to prepare high school students for the real world, that really has not been my experience of high school students. What I have found in high school is that high school really is a snapshot or a microcosm of life. There is no such thing as the quote-unquote real world. High school is the real world. It's just a lot more honest with itself. And any drama or interpersonal social issues you find in high school, you are going to find in the quote-unquote real world when you get out into your career field. The only difference is the drama becomes more serious and more complicated and worse somehow, but high school is life. But despite the fact that I still found people to be less pleasant to be around, what I did notice in my students teaching high school was this crazy interest in truth, this search for truth. This is what drew me to teaching originally. It's why I'm still a teacher. My students can be so open and honest and truth-seeking that it just makes them so much fun to work with. And I think I've come to realize that everyone is interested in this search for truth. I think that search for truth permeates all of life. Religion, politics, sexuality, pop culture, your career choices, almost everything we do or everything we believe in is at least in part driven by this search for deeper truth or meaning in the universe. And the questions we ask in the search for truth are pivotal, but they can also be super awkward, especially in a classroom setting. And so it was in my first year of teaching that I bought a plastic trash can that was shaped like a frog. And if you're interested in seeing what that frog looks like, I will post a picture of it to the Frog Questions social media account, so you can look that up after this episode. But the purpose of this frog was for my students to be able to submit questions on anything at all they would like to discuss. It could be related to the curriculum. It might not be related to the curriculum. It might be very serious. It might be very silly. And it doesn't really matter, serious or silly. All of these questions, I think, are somehow related to our search for identity, our search for truth in the universe. And now I should acknowledge that as a teacher in a classroom setting, there's maybe this implication that I have all the answers, and that's certainly not what I was trying to drive at with the frog. The point of the frog was not that you could ask me anything and that I could answer any question, because obviously I am still very much on this quest for truth, the search for truth myself. But what the frog did was provide this impetus to honest discussion. So by submitting questions in the frog, we could have these open, honest arguments and discussions and debates and talks, and together I think we were able to uncover truth, shed light on truth that otherwise, without the frog, without the ability to ask a question anonymously, we might be too afraid to voice out loud. To my partial surprise, the frog was very popular, and it wasn't long before I had received too many questions to answer in a class period, and this is what drove the initial creation of the Frog Questions social media accounts. Frog Questions has started a YouTube, it started a Twitter, and this was a way so that outside the classroom, either my current students or my past students who had now moved on to college could still submit questions, and we could have sort of open forum conversations through social media. And then not long after opening the frogquestions.com URL for submitting questions, I realized that I was lacking in two areas. First, it took too much time with my teaching schedule to be able to create and edit and produce these videos for YouTube. And the other area I was lacking besides the time was my own expertise. Some of these questions really are important, but they drive into areas of personal experience where I am lacking. So we've arrived now at the Frog Questions podcast, which is what you are listening to right now. And there's two ways that the podcast is going to be better, I think, than anything Frog Questions has ever done in the past. First, it's much faster to edit and upload audio as opposed to video. And this is going to make it easier to record questions and to open up discussions so that we can stick to a weekly schedule for dropping episodes. And the second way I think the podcast is going to be better is my ability to bring in guests who may be more experienced in different areas of life than myself. I have had a very limited experience, a very limited snapshot of life, and it's helpful, I think, to bring in people who have had different and more experiences than I have. So I purchased a frog trash can about 8 years ago, and this is where we are today, a Frog Questions podcast. Again, my name is Ben Maerzke. Some quick things about me so that we're all on the same page. I am a Roman Catholic, but I happen to be interested in all religious traditions, and I'm open to talking about anything in the field of religion. I generally think that modern political institutions are largely ineffective, but I also would love to discuss solutions with you, if that's something you want to talk about. I tend not to, I'd like to be open about this, but I honestly do tend not to lean either too far to the left or right, conservative or liberal. I'm more interested in solutions to individual problems, no matter which side of the aisle they may fall on. I am deeply introverted, as I've said before, but ironically enough, I spend most of my time talking to other people, and that is a paradox we should probably get into another day. I don't feel like self-assessing too much in this moment. And as I've said before, I do dislike the human race in general, but the reason I dislike the human race is only because I hold them to such a high standard, and I think people are capable of so much more than they put effort into on a daily basis. I think we can be so much better and do so much more. We can accomplish great things together, and right now we just aren't. We spend more time arguing about things that don't matter and being rude to each other, when as a species we are capable of amazing things that we just, I think, ignore, and that makes me angry. But that's me in a nutshell, and I am actually not that important to this overall podcast, although I am the host. My role here is really to just serve as a facilitator to the frog, and the frog is driven by you. So what matters more is who you are, and wherever you all are in your search for truth, whatever's on your mind, I would love to discuss it. And again, the great thing about the frog is that this is anonymous, and if there's something that's awkward or something that might offend people, no one's going to get in trouble besides me. I will read the questions and we can open that discussion. I think anonymity can lead to some of the best conversations that there are. There's no topic that's off limits for frog questions. I don't care if it seems boring or silly. I don't care if it seems very serious and is going to upset and offend people. At the end of the day, we make progress and we accomplish great things when we talk to each other. So we just need to get the conversation started. And if it ruffles feathers at the beginning, that's totally fine. We're always moving forward. So I encourage you, please submit your questions. You can submit a question or a topic for us to discuss for the podcast through our website at frogquestions.com. As we move on, I will be recording some of these shows on my own, and I will also occasionally bring in a guest, especially if the topic is controversial, because arguments are way more interesting and way more fun if I have someone to actually argue with. So you can follow me on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at Frog Questions. All of those are at Frog Questions. And links to all of these social media accounts are available through the website. And that website is, again, www.frogquestions.com. We all have questions. Let's find the answers together. This conversation is going to begin next week when I read your questions right here on the Frog Questions podcast. So subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to visit our website to submit your questions. See you next week.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Frog Questions wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. For more information or to ask a question of your own, please visit frogquestions.com.